There's sparkling water, there's fancy smart water.
We're very fancy.
So, I was in Israel in 1969, and going down to a lot, and we stopped to walk to meet, we fell in water. Only Jews sell water. I mean, it's really, it was like 47 years ago. Who would think it'd be a multi-trillion-dollar industry?
You know,
And it's all the same stuff coming out of.
you know what the industry that Canada is exporting here. Here. Canada is exporting here to China.
Hot air?
Air?
No,
Air.
here.
Salt air.
Yeah, because
Fresh
China's the
salt
pollution
air.
is so bad. The pollution is so bad, so Canada's selling
Fresh
Here.
salt air.
How's she come in a bag in the
In a bottle.
in a bottle.
They catch it in a net and they bottle it. It is the most bizarre thing. And they say that it has a salty aroma to it.
I mean, I wish I could make this up. I mean, let's see.
I saw
Hey,
that.
I'm gonna get a glass of water and then we shall begin. Because no time like the present, right?
I sealed my mouth for the night.
Okay. Are we ready?
They added bubbles.
Okay.
It
So,
doesn't come out of the round.
let me,
Is he coming today?
I don't know. Last week he wanted to come and he
Something that was right.
wait.
Something was right. The original was that safety, whatever.
Let's,
Except for Hills. Okay.
make sure that our. Okay, everyone ready? And revive. Low. Later.
Okay.
On the recording.
Sit here
Recording. Low.
and share.
Testing.
Put them somewhere else.
Should be.
Put them somewhere else. Don't need to put them on juicy.
My. Let's see recording. I need you to do audio.
123.
Lesson 4. And for some reason, there we go. Okay. Welcome to lesson 4 of A Journey of the Soul. In the past classes, we spoke about the separation of the body from soul. More people, less people, more questions. Hopefully, we'll have to see some. Now that you guys are 4 classes in, you're educated. You can ask, strong questions, and if you take advantage, like Manuel has, of emailing me questions. I think I've been answering in timely manner. So please don't be shy to ask questions. So in the past, we've been speaking about the separation of body from soul. Last week we focused more on what happens when the soul separates from the body. And tonight we're going to focus on the soul itself. What happens to the soul after it leaves the body and it leaves the realms of the world as we know it? Okay, so we'll begin tonight's class with a video.
Birth and death are as contradictory as night and light, but they are strangely associated with an identical Hebrew word, kever. Kever means a tomb where a body is buried. But kever also means a womb where life is formed. A womb is a gateway to life, while a tomb is a gateway to afterlife. But is there an afterlife? Or does laying a body to rest in a grave mark the absolute end? If it were within our power to interview a soul, we would undoubtedly glean insight into afterlife. Instead, we have chosen to eavesdrop on a set of twins in their mother's womb to shed some light on the before life.
Hey, twin, I'm scared of birth. Why? It's the end of existence. We get ejected. We're finished. I'm also anxious, twin, but I'm not scared. Birth is supposed to be a transition to the real life. Huh, don't give me the hiccups with your after-birth real-life fantasies. How can life be supported without an umbilical cord and amniotic fluid? Well, maybe it's a radically different form of life. Maybe we won't need the cord. I wish you were right. I keep kicking that thing away from my neck. Stop spinning for a minute and imagine, twin. After birth, we will enter a ginormous universe filled with light and with air that we will breathe through our mouths. Come on, grow some brain cells, will you? Mouths are not for breathing. Besides, if your postnatal paradise existed, why has no one ever returned from that realm? Forget it. Once we leave here, we collapse into cold, dry nothingness and wither into eternal gloom. I don't think Mother would allow that to happen. She nurtures us in this cozy womb. She sends us nutrients for months on end. For what purpose? Just to end it all with birth? No. Mother has greater plans for us than that. Now you're beginning to sound infantile. Do you see a mother lurking in some corner of the womb? Not a trace. Show me a mother. And as for your nutrients, can't you feel that annoying cord? Don't exchange empirical for fantastical.
Thankfully, these two delightful infants made it safely to the other side. They grew up in the universe that one had described and the other had denied. And until today, they continue their clamorous debate. It is only that the topic of contention has slightly shifted from, is there life after the womb, to, is there life after the tomb?
Okay, so the message of the parable is that there's something beyond our state of existence. Our problem is,
That's infantile.
I have a wife to belittle me, right? Our issue is that we're so used to reality the way it is, the way we know it, that we can't imagine a reality beyond our existence. We say it can be, and the reason why is because we can't fathom it because it's not from our reality. But it comes out that we're born twice. As you see the word kever, we're born twice. We're born from the womb and we're born from the tomb. And today we're going to focus on what happens after the soul leaves and heaven and hell, which reminds me of a story. This girl brings home a guy and he's perfect. Compassionate, and he's kind, and he's handsome, he has a good job, and she's talking to her mother later, and she says, no, and the mother says, no, every good mother, you gonna get married? He says, I want to, but I have one issue. What's the problem? He doesn't believe in hell. That's why you're not getting married? It's very important to me. So don't worry about it. You marry him. Together we'll show him just how wrong he is. So hopefully, I know many of you signed up for the class mainly to this issue, or the issues revolving heaven and hell. A lot of you guys have a lot of questions. And hopefully tonight we can answer those questions. So let's begin. You're gonna need your pen for this one. Let's begin on page 124. Page 124, the learning exercise. I want you to write down, and please, if you don't mind sharing with the class, what you think you know about the Jewish view on afterlife and what you want to know. Take a minute, write down what you think you know, or you know, and what you'd like to find out about Jewish life, afterlife, and reincarnation. Okay. Anyone want to share some answers? Alan? Want to share some answers? All right.
I actually know nothing about the Jewish neo-naturalist reincarnation.
So then, what you want to know is everything.
Everything.
They say you're an all or nothing kind of guy. Okay, Doug, what say you?
Supposedly, there is reincarnation
Okay.
ongoing until you reach the perfect state.
Okay.
So it's not like we've lived before, the soul has lived before.
Okay, so you want to find out more about reincarnation. Okay, anyone else? Want to say something? Same thing, reincarnation. That's a
You have to reach a certain number of mitzvahs.
Yeah, we'll get to that. This is very important. This means soon. Annie, want to share what?
Yes, after a person dies, the soul goes back to the earth, and during that travel, the life has been reviewed, and whatever it accomplished, it's taken account of, and then it gets reassigned to a different body.
Okay.
And
So,
continue
so,
education.
So some of us have some of us have continuing education. It's like going to college, to get your master's, right? Okay. So some of you have read on it, and some of you have wondered about it. Everybody thinks about it. Some of you have taken the time. Like I've said, there's a book, The Jewish Wisdom of the Afterlife. Is very, very good. I don't think it's expensive. I put it on there. I also put on the Bima this week. Actually, 2 copies of the same book. It's called the Kuzari. Kuzari is actually a very heavy book, to borrow a term in Spanish, meaning it's not a couch book. Yeah, it's a book about Jewish theology. It's one of the fundamental. So if you want to know about many things in Jewish theology, including reward and punishment, check out that book, which like I said, you can borrow it, you can buy it on Amazon. All right, so now, one of the things that is very big in society is hell. Right? Going to hell, we all know, and it doesn't seem like a Jewish thing. It seems, Christians are all into hell. Muslims are very into heaven. Hell, it doesn't seem like we have a lot to say about it. So, some people wonder to themselves, am I going to hell? What's going to be at the end of my life? The fact that one song says the stairway to heaven, the other one says the highway to hell, tells you, exactly how much traffic they're expecting in each direction. So, everybody has something to say. Okay, next exercise. This exercise you're not going to share with the class, you're going to keep to yourself. On page 125, learning exercise number 2. I want you to rate for yourself what's pleasurable: cruise, lifetime membership to an exclusive country club, lifetime meeting. Rate it in your own social status. If you don't want, and based on what we learn later, you'll go back and compare your answers. If I haven't gotten your favorite pleasurable thing there, then sorry. Okay. So, like we said, so as we discussed last week, the soul is separated from the body, and it goes back to its spiritual existence, and everything is good. And goes to the afterlife, as we call it. But before we explain what is the afterlife, we have to understand what shapes it. What makes the afterlife? What decides what kind of afterlife we each have? So we begin with one of the 13 principles. Maimonides wrote down 13 principles of faith. And one of the principles is, you see in text number 1a. Text number 1a is that God basically has an interest. He cares about what we do. He has an interest. We're not just created, we're not just random creatures. He cares about what we do. This is the 11th principle. As you see on page 126, Maimonides writes, the 11th principle is that God, blessed be He, gives reward to those who observe the commandments of the Torah and punishes those who transgress His prohibitions. Now the question is the reward now, or later? Meaning, is it reward in this world or the next world? Jerry Seinfeld has a line, you go into the pharmacy, he's all confused. This one is fast acting, this one is long lasting. When do I want to feel good? Now or later? Right? So when is the reward? So you see, Maimonides continues that the greatest reward is to experience the pleasure of the world to come. The greatest punishment is to be cut off. Okay, so before we go on, why do you think this is called an ikar, a founding principle of Judaism? Or what's the difference, and why only 13? Give me, in your mind, what do you think one of the founding principles of Judaism is? Is Shabbat the founding principle of Judaism?
Yes.
Okay. Answer is no. I'll tell you why. You're confusing founding with important. Shabbat is very important. Ikar, founding means, the foundation means without this foundation, nothing can exist. If let's say we took Shabbat out of Judaism, would there still be Judaism? Yeah. If I took Passover out of Judaism, there still be whatever, tefillin, whatever, many of the mitzvot. But if you take the belief in reward and punishment out of Judaism, then why are we doing what we're doing? So this is why it's a founding principle. So what Maimonides is saying over here is something very powerful. When is there reward and punishment? It's mainly spiritual. There are physical benefits. For example, in the last portion of the book of Leviticus of Ikra, says if you follow all my statutes, I'll give you rain, and I'll give you children, and I'll give you health, and all the things that we like. But it's mainly spiritual. Think of it as an investment. You have your principal investment, and then you have the return. So it's explained in Kabbalah that when you do a mitzvah, the principal investment that grows is spiritual. What we benefit in this world is just a slight return. We cannot fully receive the benefits from our mitzvah. So this explains why the reward for a mitzvah is spiritual, because we have no way of appreciating it. And the pleasure, if you remember back in lesson 1, obviously you guys are reading through and clicking on the links and listening to the classes, that goes without saying. If you remember, there was a text back in lesson 1 which says that all the pleasure in this world can't compare to the pleasure in the world to come. You remember that? It's an ethics of our fathers. So the pleasure we get is spiritually is a lot more powerful than anything we can experience down here. Before we go on, any questions? Okay.
Is that for everybody?
Yeah. A mitzvah is a mitzvah. Doesn't make a difference.
No, I mean the reward.
Meaning how good the reward is?
No, I mean it is some people's rewards a lot more than others.
Well, it depends how many mitzvahs you do. It also depends how you do it. So there's the basic fulfillment of the mitzvah, and then there's how good you do it. So for example, take a lulav and etrog, right? You can just get a regular etrog, and you can buy an etrog for $200-300.
I mean, it would.
An etrog, the citron on Sukkot, right? So you can just get a couch, Walmart or IKEA. Sorry, or you can go to. I only shop at Walmart and IKEA. Or Eldorado, something more. So depending on how well you do the mitzvah, that's how you return. Okay.
Wait, so if there is no reward, doesn't mean there is no reward, doesn't mean you have to do whatever you want to do. You still have
Thank
to
you very
do
much,
the right
Anna.
thing.
Oh, thank you very much, Anna. You perfect segue to what we're about to speak about. Thank you very much.
Did you repeat what she said?
She said, I'll put it in other words. The problem that a lot of people have when we're discussing is he made God into this petty guy. That God's sitting there with a scorecard. Oh, you didn't put on tefillin today. You didn't light Shabbos candles. The guy is throwing thunderbolts with his triton, right? He's throwing thunderbolts with his pitchfork. He doesn't seem godly. You expect, if I cut you off, you cut me off, right? That's the way driving works, right? we human beings, we go tit for tat. We keep score. God, I mean, he should. It doesn't seem godly. And number one, and number two, we all know the right thing to do. I need God to threaten me that if I don't do the right thing, you're going to punish me. That's the kind of person I am. And also, I need God. What am I, a baby? I need God to entice me and to bribe me. If you do a mitzvah, I'll give you spiritual candy. So it doesn't seem befitting. Actually, by the way, there's a very interesting, and I think it's Appendix B. The word's a little later. Yeah, if you check at Appendix B, on page 148. 148, Maimonides writes why that's necessary. And the fact of the matter is, the reason why it's necessary is because as much as you want to say, and maybe Anna, you're a very good person, and I know you are a good person, but not everybody is pure and altruistic. So let me ask you a question. If let's say if I can tell you that there's no cop at the corner, and you're in a rush, let's say you have a good reason, would you take the red light? Or if every time a cop pulled you over, he came to you and said, Anna, you were speeding. You really shouldn't do that. Well, the fact of the matter is that people are, you have to deal with the facts on the ground, and the way people act, people need rules and structure, and they need benefits and they need consequences and rewards for acting the way they do. While very few people can act the way they're supposed to because that's the way they're supposed to. They tell the story of Rab Nachum of Chernobyl, who was a very holy man. When he was a child and he did something that was even slightly wrong, he would blush. And now we're talking about something very wrong, something improper. He would blush because he felt what he did was improper. Most of us are not like that. Most of us, we need to know that the cop might be hiding in the trees. So, for example, I know plenty of people, they drive with Waze, not because they don't know the way, because they want to see if the cop is around the corner. So that's just the way we are. So you see in page number 127. So why is the notion of divine reward and punishment a foundational Jewish belief? So on a simple level, it's because we need to have reward and punishment. Actually, I fell behind in my slides. So on one hand, we can argue, we can say that reward and punishment keeps people honest. If people do what they're supposed to, they get a reward. If not, you get a punishment. But there's actually, it goes a lot deeper. The Reincarnation says something very interesting. Reincarnation, his name is Menachem Reincarnation. He was a Kabbalist in the 1300s, and he says something very interesting about what a mitzvah and avera is. Most of us, so let's say you're like me. You push the limits when you drive. On the slow side. What do you think? When you get pulled over and the cop gives you a ticket, is there any connection between the ticket and the speeding? Yes. No. It's not a result. Meaning the punishment for the crime is in no way connected to the actual crime. It's not a result. It's a consequence. It's not a result. Look at the Rekanti says. Look at the text. You'll understand what I'm saying. When we do a mitzvah, the result of the mitzvah is positive. When we do an avera, the result is negative. It's not that God is sitting there and there's something separate. So, for example, if you're a doctor, you give someone a medicine, they give you money. Is the money connected to the medicine? No. Society has decided the way to reimburse you, the way to pay you back, is with money. In the old days, they wouldn't give you money. They'd give you a cow or a goat, whatever it is. So the reimbursement, the result, the consequence is no way connected to the act. It's something society has decided, this is the structure how we're going to live. right? But with a mitzvah and an avera, that's not the case. When we do something positive, when we do a mitzvah, the reward is a result. The good is the result. So let's take, for example, God says, if we do what He says, He'll make it rain. Rain is another word for an abundance or sustenance, right? So let's take rain, for example. It's not if we do a mitzvah, God sends the clouds. Oh, you did an avera, bring the clouds back. No, the mitzvah brings the rain. And the avera, God forbid otherwise. So, and He says, if you go outside, oh, it's from New York. If you go outside now in the winter in New York, or in the Northeast, and you don't dress properly, you get cold. Is that a punishment? It's a natural result. If you plant grain in the ground and you reap produce, is that a reward? No, it's a result. So think of it like this: when a person works, so you work, you get money, and then with the money you buy food. But there's no connection between the work and the money and the food, right? I mean, if you do your job, society has decided that I should give you money. But let's say I wanted to pay you with a car or give you something of value. Doesn't make a difference. And when you walk into the supermarket, the society has decided that in order to buy the food, you have to pay with money. But the food is not a result of the work. Is that making sense to everybody? As opposed to planting, you sow, you reap, you have food. Which meaning the wheat you get out of the ground, that's a natural consequence, a natural result. I'm going to say consequence because we'll use that later. The natural result of what we do. So I told the story to somebody. I'm not sure if that's on here. So I heard the story this past week. In Judaism, the belief is every mitzvah is a channel for God's blessing. That's why it's very important to have kosher mezuzot and kosher tefillin. I heard a story this past week of a guy, to make the story very, very short, his daughter put a Q-tip in the ear, and she had 2 surgeries, hearing was not coming back. She kept losing her hearing. So he wrote a letter into the Rebbe. The Rebbe said, check the mezuzah on the door of the baby's room. They checked the mezuzah, the word Shema, which means here, was gone. Now, is the Rebbe a prophet? No, maybe. But the explanation of the story is the Rebbe understood that something in the spiritual channel, in the natural order of things, is wrong. So if we restore nature, then she can hear. And that's what they did when they changed the mezuzah. So this is the difference between a mitzvah and something else. When we do a mitzvah, he's saying something tremendous over here. When we do a mitzvah, we bring rain. So the way the Torah would look at speeding doesn't bring a ticket. In the Torah's view, okay, let's go back to the ticket analogy. Why does the cop give you a ticket? He wants you to slow down so you don't crash. Right? In Torah's view, speeding results in a crash because the action has an immediate result. It's not a roundabout way to get something. So really, if you think about it, there's no such thing as reward and punishment the conventional way. Because reward is, we have the prize store for the kids here in Hebrew school. They learn Aleph Beis. Any connection between the Aleph Beis and the prize? No, there isn't. So when we think of a reward, so many times we think of heaven and hell. We think of there's a room, in heaven, the room with lights and sun and wing, right? And the question is, do you go into that room or you go to the oven? That's not the case. What Kanti is saying here, you see in text number 3, is that we create our heaven, we create our hell. He said the reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah, the retribution of a sin is a sin. So on the surface, obviously, the opportunity that every mitzvah, because it's so holy, and you get it, and you enjoy the mitzvah, you get a chance to do another mitzvah. So every mitzvah multiplies. But he's saying here something much, much greater. Let's take the negative side because it's very powerful. When we do something negative, and then we appreciate how bad it was, the shame of it destroys us. So when a person steals, he robs, the punishment is he realizes what kind of person he robbed himself of his dignity. There's an old Russian fable which says was once a peasant couple that had a son, and the son was a genius, and no one in a small town could educate him, so they sent him to the big city, and he was there for many years, and he became a great professor, and he only conversed with his parents via mail, snail mail, not email. This is Russian fable. And so finally, after many years, he decided it's time to visit his parents. But he didn't want to scare his parents, so he wrote a letter to the townspeople, and he told them he was coming, and his plan was he would show up to his parents' home and stay as a guest, and then he would slowly introduce himself his parents didn't have that shock. So he comes to his parents' door, he knocks on the door, his parents see a nobleman there, they welcome him in. He's going to sleep, and that night, the peasant, he has an idea what he's going to rob the nobleman. He kills the nobleman, and he buries him. The next day, the townspeople tell him what happened. So they put him on trial, and the judge, instead of sending him to execution, says, "No, you're going to live. You're not going to kill him. You're going to live with the shame your entire life. All your son's possessions that he brought, you're going to live with that shame." The same thing is on the positive side. When we do something positive, we create a positive environment. So when we work on something positive, when we work on a relationship, strengthening the relationship, a friendship, a marriage, so we benefit from that environment we created. And when we do something negative, oh, sorry. When we do something negative, we reap the benefits from what we do. But this is only external, because then we say every single day the first line: the soul that you've given me is pure. That means every single person's soul is pure, and it cannot be corrupted. So now we make a choice: are we going to conceal that holy soul with garbage, or are we going to refine it? So again, this goes back to, this tells us, why is the belief in reward and punishment a founding principle? Because this tells us something very, very powerful, and I hope this hits home, because when I learned it, it did for me. Normally, when we do something, if I told you that if you do A, you get a reward, is the act itself holy? Does it have intrinsic value? You know, many people want to become doctors. Why do many people become doctors? I remember reading this. Why?
To help.
I mean, they don't just want to make money. They want to go home and they want their work to mean something. That's why people leave it all behind and they go. I mean, they want their actions to have intrinsic value. So that's why a lot of people go into medicine. What the Torah is telling us is, because we build our own heaven and otherwise, every act we do has value. Now everything we do is holy. Every act has intrinsic value. So now we can understand why it's a founding principle of the Jewish religion. Because without this, then we're just random acts of nothing. So if you're a good person, you're a good person. So when you give charity, when you do something positive, that act, forget about the reward, that act itself is holy. Is that, any questions? Make sense? Yeah, Priscilla, go ahead.
To me, God is forgiving me, and if I messed up, He will forgive me.
100%. But we're saying here, it doesn't.
I won't be without punishment all my life.
Okay. But again, what we're saying here actually strengthens your argument, because if the punishment, if we use the word punishment, and the punishment has no connection to the act, then God should forgive you, and He shouldn't punish you. But God's not punishing you. He's not punishing you. He's allowing you to exist in the environment you created. There's an analogy, not a perfect analogy, there's an analogy of the guy who worked for a home building company for 30 years. And he was the best contractor this guy had. And he announced his retirement after 30 years. And the guy says, you know, do me a favor, we have one more job. Could you build one more house just for my sake? The guy set his mind on retirement. He really didn't want to do it. But after 30 years working with the guy, he wanted to do him a favor. So the contractor built one last house. And because his heart and mind wasn't in it, very bad work, very shoddy work. And when the house was complete, the contractor says, gives him the keys. This is your house. This is the home you built for yourself. This is what we do. Is that a punishment? That's not a punishment. And God does forgive you. And that's actually going to lead in. You guys are very good tonight. You're helping me segue. This is going to lead in to our belief in hell. It's because He forgives you, we don't believe in eternal damnation.
You don't
believe in eternal damnation. There is no such thing as eternal damnation because He's forgiven. And because He's forgiving, we can change the length and duration of our stay in hell. Which we're not going to use that word in a second anyway. So going back to what we're saying, afterlife is not another existing world. So where's heaven? Where's earth? I mean, where's hell? It's not a place. It's not you go to 95, or they say in Israel, Yishar, out of Saf. You go, I don't know if you ever ask directions in Israel. It's impossible. You go straight to the end, and you ask over there. They're famous for saying that. It's not a place. It's an environment you create. And depending on how you act, that's how it is. Which differs from other religions. Now, I once heard from a rabbi, he said, there's another religion out there that their belief how to get to heaven is all immoral, so the heaven is immoral. So they believe you have to kill to get to heaven. What do you do when you get to heaven? You have 72 women. Our belief is, in order to get to heaven, you got to do good. So when you get to heaven, it's good. Their belief in the path is also the belief in the destination. It's interesting. Okay, so now let's move on to a very important topic, which I think many of you have come here tonight, or they're watching here live and listen to the recording. Hell. What's the first? We do a rapid response. When I say hell, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Fire.
Fire. Sabrina? She's laughing. I don't know.
Yeah, darkness and fire and lost souls.
Joe, what do you say?
A hot place.
A hot place.
Dante Inferno.
Dante's Inferno. Yeah, right. They tell a story of a man from Illinois decided to retire to Florida. But he went during the summer. But the agreement was he would go down early to get the apartment set up. So he goes down a few days early, and he decides to send his wife an email. But unfortunately, he mistyped the email address and went to a different woman. The woman was sitting shiva for her husband, and this is the email she gets. She goes, "Dearest wife," says, "I just checked in. Everything's prepared for your arrival tomorrow. Love you dearly. P.S. It's very hot down here." Let's get something off the bat. Judaism believes in hell. We do believe in hell. Not usually the way hell everyone else believes in, but we do believe in it. And that's why we're not going to use the word hell. We're going to use the word Gehenna. Who has heard of that word before? Gehenna? Yes. Gehenna is the terminology we refer to it. Why? There's a few reasons why it's referred to that term. That's actually a place in Israel. It's Gai Hinnom. It's the valley of the son of Hinnom, where that great tragedy was committed. Anyway, so the way usually people think of Gehenna is God sitting there and he's punishing the guy, and oh, he did bad, so he deserved it. Right? You get what's coming to you. Karma. That's usually the way people think of hell. He brought it upon himself. Let's look at the Jewish view of hell. What is hell? Gehenna, hell is, number one, is not eternal damnation. We don't believe in that eternal damnation. Because as we said before, going back to the slide here, right here, the soul is pure and it cannot be corrupted. And therefore, there's nothing you can do. The good news is, no matter how much you mess up, there's nothing you can do that warrants eternal damnation. Nothing. We don't believe in, wrong way. We don't believe in eternal damnation. We'll get to this in a second. Each one of our actions has an effect, we said, right? So if you give charity, let's say, for example, you have a hard time giving charity, putting your hand in your pocket. So you give charity the first time, and then the second time it gets easier. And slowly but surely, you mold your character. There's actually a debate. If let's say, not a debate, it's an interesting question brought up. If you're going to give, let's say, $100 to charity, how should you give it? All at once, or should you spread it out? Which one's better?
Once.
Depends who's receiving it.
Why?
I mean, it depends who you ask. Someone receiving it or the one that's giving it.
Okay, so if it's Chabad Pembroke Pines, do we have your credit card on file? Doesn't make a difference. So right, this would be a good time to push the Chai Club, giving monthly. The answer is monthly, or let's break it up into why? Because you're in the act of giving constantly. Because let's say you give it once, so you get a negative feeling over with. Let me give you an old mashal, old example I heard in Yiddish once. Once there was a rich man and he was a brute. He wasn't a nice, refined person. And he invited a poor man who was a more refined person. So it came time for the Shabbos meal. To the balabas, the owner, cuts a big piece of challah and he puts it by him and he's eating. The refined, the guest, he cuts a small piece of challah and he eats it. When he wants another piece of challah, he eats it. And third. So finally, the owner can't take it anymore. He said, I don't understand. Just take a big piece of challah. He said, what's the difference to you? If I'm going to take challah, the challah is going to eat anyway. Because you don't understand. Every time you cut the challah, you're cutting my heart. You're slicing me in the heart. If we can program ourselves to constant giving, then we mold a character. Unfortunately, it's the same way on the negative side. When you do something bad once, the next time it's a lot easier. And we mold our character into the negative. So this is the way we get affected. None of us are perfect. I'm not perfect. I shouldn't make. So most of us make mistakes. So when we make these mistakes, we can't go up and just walk into paradise. It doesn't work that way. Why? Because our soul, we said before, was pure. And because of the way we acted, we did not create an environment for the transition. Some people go from this world straight to heaven, no transition phase needed. These days, globally, there's a concept of cleanliness. But if you look at our forefathers when they came to Ellis Island, what did they make them do? No one could just walk in. Lice and all the sicknesses, and that's why they went to Ellis Island first. So if you come from a foreign land and you have all this foreign stuff on you, you can't just walk into paradise. You need to go through some cleansing, some preparation process. That is Gehenna. Gehenna is rehabilitation. When you break something and you have to fix it, you can't walk. That's not a punishment. You're going through rehabilitation. And you see over here, there's a text in number 4. Text number 4, page 129. But I want to tell you the story behind this text before you read it. One of the great characters in the Gemara, interesting character, is a man named Acher. Acher His real name was Elisha ben Avuya. He was a colleague of Rabbi Akiva, a great rabbi, a holy man. One day, he threw it all away. He became an heretic, became a great sinner, and they no longer called him by his name. They called him Acher, something else, someone else. And he's still quoted because he was a genius. He wasn't a regular rabbi. They still quote him. If you look in the Talmud, they'll say, this guy says this, Acher says. That's how great. Rabbi Meir, all his students abandoned him. Rabbi Meir was the one student who didn't let him go. He kept learning with him. And it says when Acher died, you see, now look at text number 4. So when Acher died, the heavenly court said, let him not be judged in Gehenna, and let him not enter paradise. Let him not be judged because he learned Torah. Let him not enter paradise because he sinned. Rabbi Meir said, better that he be judged and go to hell. This is a good student. His student said, I'm going to send my teacher to hell. How could that be? But based on what we explained, Gehenna is not a punishment. Gehenna is a process to get back to who you truly are. Then it's actually good to go to hell. You know what the worst thing is? Not to go to hell. Not to go to heaven. Let me give you a real life example.
Like purgatory or?
The purgatory is hell. Purgatory there's 4, I didn't want to get into it tonight.
Oh, yeah.
But there's four different general types of hell. But again.
Well, we will have that.
Jump into it. Go ahead. Jump.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I didn't wear my red suit. I didn't want to focus on that and hell. I want to focus on heaven. That's what the rest of it. Anyway, who knows what the term aguna means? Anyone know what the term means?
Honest.
Honest?
Honor.
No, it's a title for a person. Aguna. It's with an I. In Exodus, God says, if you oppress a widow or orphans, if the verse in Exodus 22 is your wives will be, it actually says, I will slay you, and your wives will be widows, and your sons will be orphans. So Rashi asks the question. Says, obviously, if God slays you, your wife is going to be a widow, and your sons are going to be orphans. So Rashi says, rather, this is another curse, because the rule is a woman can't marry 2 men. And the only way she can remarry is if she gets divorced or her husband dies. What if you don't know where the husband is? So she's stuck in limbo. She can't move on with her life. And that is the worst. To be in limbo, not have any direction, not know where you are, that is the ultimate curse. And that's why Rashi says, that's the explanation of this verse. And which reminds me of a story. There's a story when Rabbi Mendel Futterfass, as you know by now, I'm a big fan of his. When he lived in Russia, once a circus or an act came to town, and part of the act was the tightrope walk. And after the show, the tightrope walker saw the distinguished rabbi, and he went over to him and asked him, so Rabbi, which is harder, going there or coming back? So Rabbi Mendel Futterfass answered, he said, it's not going or returning that's hard. It's rather when you turn around. Because then when you turn around, you're not either in this direction or in the other direction. You're in limbo. That is the worst. And now we understand why Rabbi Meir prayed for his master, his teacher, Acher, to go to hell, to go take a Gehenna, because at least he gets the process started. An interesting thing, by the way, the end of the story is that Rabbi Meir said that when I die, you're going to see smoke rise from Acher's caver as a sign that I was successful in my prayers to get the process started, and that's what happened. Rabbi Meir passed away. Smoke rose from Acher's grave as a sign that he was in hell. And you see in text number 5, the purpose of hell, the purpose of Gehenna. We're going to start using that term, okay? Gehenna, not hell. Okay? The purpose of Gehenna, on page 130, the Shner Zamno Liadi says, is to refine the soul and rid it of any negativity it contracted. This is similar to the process of smelting silver, where the dross is burned away in this furnace, leaving the silver clean and without impurity. Same thing with the soul. So really, soul, Gehenna isn't hell, a different name. Yeah, Doug.
There's a contradiction I find.
Okay.
You're saying that the soul is pure,
Okay.
and it's continually pure.
Okay.
So why do you have to refine the soul?
We're not redefining the soul, but as we explained in previous classes, because of what we do in this world, because there's a tight marriage between the soul and the body, so how the body acts affects the soul. And therefore, the soul doesn't return sometimes in the pristine state that it was given. And that's what has to do. So when we understanding of Gehenna is the purging and the cleansing of those negative things we did. And we'll get to the positive side in a second. Understand?
Is there a time factor in this?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, we'll get to the thing. Okay, so right now, so instead of thinking of it as hell and punishment, think of it as soul catharsis, which means the soul experiences the negative effects of its action. There's something called the worst punishment is in Hebrew called bush shame. When you could recognize that what you did is unbefitting, you feel shame. There's a story. The previous Rebbe, when he was a child, he did something wrong. I don't remember what it was. And his father, who the Rebbe Rashab or Shalom Dever, gave him a patch. Patch is Yiddish for. It was a light patch. And the Rebbe went into the room, his private room, and he started crying. And then the Friedrich Rebbe, Yosef Yitzchak, the child was also crying. So his mother came and said, "Did Tati patch you so hard?" He said, "No. I'm crying because father is crying." The shame of it. And by the way, this ties into Yom Kippur. In Yom Kippur, we come in and we tell God we're ashamed of what we did. And God cries and we cry because God is crying.
I got a great quote related to that, Golda Meir. She said, "When you kill our sons, we mourn, we'll get over them. But when we have to kill your sons, that's
right.
where the pain is."
That's right.
I paraphrase.
Yeah, I know that's a famous quote. So this shame hurts. I'm sure you've all heard the saying, truth hurts. But over here, the truth hurts, meaning that when you know who you truly are and how you should truly behave, and then you see how you did behave, that shame hurts. And just like any therapy, go to physical therapy. You have a physical therapy hurts. Therapy hurts, and even psychological therapy. People break down because when you're working to improve yourself, when you have to move on from some negative event, there's pain involved. But the pain is not a negative thing. It's a process. So the soul experiences, and the painful process cleanses the soul. And now, once that happens, once the soul is cleansed from its negative experience, now we can talk about paradise. Now we can talk about heaven, and now we'll get to your question: how long does it last? We're getting there right now. Before we go on, quick question. Go ahead.
Yeah, you kind of threw it out there very subtly and then just skipped all over it, which is limbo, right? You said, so, you have heaven, you have hell. Hell is a transition in order to get to heaven, but what's worse than hell is limbo.
Okay.
So is there such a state? Is that state the permanent state?
There is such a state, but that state is for the very, very select few. If you look at appendix, was it the story of Rabbi Akiva, appendix B or C? If you look at appendix, you don't have a book. Okay, in appendix, I think it's C. The story of Rabbi Akiva. Yes, it's a story. Appendix C has a story, but don't read it because that has to do with Kaddish. Okay, we'll get to that. The story with Kaddish. That story we'll bring it up later. At the end of the class, we'll talk about Kaddish. We'll answer that question. The answer is yes, it exists. But very few select.
What's it called?
I don't know if there's a term. I don't know if there's a term for it. Okay. So now, because Gehenna is a phase, it's not a destination. Every soul reaches the destination of Gan Eden, Garden of Eden, heaven. As you see in text number 6, the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, every single Jew has a share in the world to come. Every single Jew. This is true of every single Jew, no matter how righteous, how pious, how moral. So Gehenna, what we said before, isn't an eternal damnation, a share in the world to come. Doug, it answers your question. The maximum a soul can be in the process of cleansing is 12 months, which explains, I think we brought it up in last week's class, why we only say Kaddish for 11 months. And someone asked that question last week. Why we only say Kaddish for 11 months? Because no child should testify about their father, or mother, my parent was so miserable, they needed a full 12 months of cleansing. The previous Rebbe said you can have people who are there for a day, a month, 2, 3 months. We don't know. Nobody knows. Therefore, everybody says Kaddish for the same 11 months. But no matter how miserable a person is, the maximum a person could be there is for 12 months. As you see, the Mishnah says, text number in number 7.
Wait, I don't understand where the 12 comes from. Like, how do we know that as humans, with our soul living here and not having visited there and been back to say, hey, I was there for 11 and a half months. How do you know that?
No, we don't know how long a soul was there. We know the maximum term. If you remember from last week's class, you were here last week? Okay, so last week we explained that the soul departs from the body in stages. There's 3 days, corresponding to our morning, that's the soul's transition. You have 3 days, 7 days, 30 days, and 12 months. And that's why after 12 months, there's no more mourning. So for example, during the 12 months, a person's not, we keep a candle lit. You'll see the yard site, we'll get to that in a few. There's a few observances we do during the 30 days and then during the 12 months. After 12 months, the only important day is the yard site and Yizkor, which we'll get to in a second. Okay? All right.
Now, going back, last week we were talking about the 12 months now. These 12 months are actually the same 12 months that we were talking about last week, or?
That's a very, very good question. A very good question. It's debated the answer is...
Like eternity. Is eternity on the 24-hour watch? I mean, eternity. Is it 12 months? Is it 29 days?
It's definitely not eternity. You said there's no eternal damnation. But what I'll say is this. They bring down that, are you familiar with the prophet, the personality of Job? Job was a person who suffered tremendously, 70 years of just tremendous suffering. It says 1 moment or 1 hour of Gehenna doesn't compare to all the 70 years. So even if, take it literally that it's actually 12 months. But those 12 months are bad. Bad. So even, again, we said in the beginning of the class, we can only attach things we understand to it. So you're thinking, how bad could it be? Right, you know. So, but take it literally. Take it literally. But what we do has the ability to change. This is important also for later on, after when a person passes away, the ones we leave behind can do something for the soul. But what we do, we say in Rosh Hashanah, sincere teshuvah can wipe out. So even if a person is very, very bad, he can reshape himself, and he can define until you have the ability to do teshuvah, to change until your last moment. And that's what we say on Rosh Hashanah. One of the solemn, most prayers on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, it's written who's going to live and who's going to die. Everything is written down. But what do we end off in the bold? But repentance, prayer, charity, revoke the evil decree. So we have the normal result. But if we do teshuvah, if we repent, if we change, then we write a new narrative for ourselves. Okay. So now that we spoke about the negative side, let's move on to the positive side. What is paradise? How do we define Gan Eden and paradise? Tell a story of 3 souls come up simultaneously to heaven. and the gatekeeper says, you know, you have a little bit of a backlog. We can't let all of you in. So whoever says a real sob story, that's the one that's going to get into heaven. So one guy says, my job on earth, I was a window washer for these big buildings. I was on the 53rd floor, and the rope snapped, and I was falling down. I thought I'm going to die. But thank God there was a window open on the 30th floor. I grabbed onto the windowsill. I thought, I'm alive. I'm hanging there. All of a sudden, some guy comes and smashes my fingers. So I'm falling down. I thought, I'm going to die. But I land in a tree. Thank God I'm alive. Then the same idiot goes and throws a refrigerator on top of me. So I died. The keeper says, wow, that's tragic. You can go in. What about the second guy? He says, I had a feeling my wife wasn't being faithful. So I decided to come home in the middle of the day. I come home, I see her at home, I know the guy's somewhere. I'm looking. I see the guy hanging from the windowsill. So I go, and I knock his fingers. I thought the guy's dead. No, he lands in a tree. Oh, that piece of garbage. So I take the refrigerator, and I throw it on top of it. Thank God he died. And from the excitement and the heartache, I had a heart attack and I died. The keeper says, that is pretty tragic. You can go to heaven. What about you? Number 3, he says, I don't know. All I know is I was in the refrigerator. So what is paradise? So look at text number 8. We're running a little late today. So, which looks at text number 8. Don Yitzchak Abarbanel says, the concept of spiritual reward is different from human intellect to visualize and grasp. We can't understand it. Try explaining a blind person color. Can't. Maybe you can understand the concept of color, but he can't understand color. Obviously, if he's never seen it. So the same thing is we can understand because it's not physical. We only understand physical. The Torah is replete with anthropomorphic terms for God. The finger of God. The hand of God. God gets angry. All these things, God doesn't have a hand. God doesn't have a finger. We only do it to understand because we have to relate to physical terms. With kids, how much you love me? This much. You ever see it? So, same thing is with reward in heaven. There's no such thing as we can understand a reward, like going back to what we said before. Remember what we said, gauging the reward 1 to 10. How does it measure up? You can't really measure up. And this is how the Talmud explains the experience. As you see in text number 9 of page 132. In the hereafter, notice the difference between this, what the Talmud says, and what the fanatical Muslims say. In the hereafter, there's no eating or drinking, procreation, commerce, jealousy, hatred, or competition. Rather, the righteous sit at their heads adorned with crowns. They bask in the glow of all these things they did. So,
What do they do on Wednesday?
For us, pleasure is very important. In everything we do, pleasure is very important. So for kids, it's a lollipop, right? Or my son, cars. Give him a car, it's pleasurable. That's how we got him potty trained. Cars are very important. You get a little older, it's not lollipops and cars anymore. It's iPhones and iPads. Right? My mother just won in a raffle. So Mordechai won an iPad Pro. Yes, she did. Very good. What is it? So yeah, it's like an iPhone. It's like, no, man, it's a little bit better, right? Different. So as we get older, though, we appreciate better things. And you get older, you understand, fancy wine, classical music, Cuban cigars, right? As we grow older, as we appreciate our gauge of what's pleasurable and what's not, it changes. But the most pleasurable thing in the world is a relationship. Is a good relationship. Because when a person is in a good relationship, it changes his whole outlook on life. So now think of it like this. The word mitzvah comes from the word tzavta, which means to unite, to combine. When you do a mitzvah, you are entering into a relationship with God. But the only issue is you can't appreciate it now, the effect of that relationship. So you do something for someone else. And let's say you don't understand. There are stories replete them, so you could learn the movies, whatever it is, where somebody said a kind word to somebody. I heard a story. I read this recently, the past few weeks, of a guy who's a famous scientist. And it was one time he was a kid. He said, as a kid, I wasn't really interested in science. And one time in class, I was asking questions, and the teacher said, "Wow, you're really good at science." Oh, I'm sorry, it was medicine or science, or something like that. And based on that comment, the teacher had no idea what he did. And because of that, this guy became a world famous scientist or was a doctor. I forgot exactly what it is. So sometimes when it comes to a mitzvah, we do it and we don't appreciate the effects of our actions. But when a person passes on, and then we're not bound by physical understanding, then paradise, Gan Eden, means we get to appreciate the effects of what we did. We fully begin to understand the good in what we do, and vice versa on the negative. This gives a whole different understanding of what paradise is. Paradise isn't fancy cars and beautiful women. That's not connected to anything we're doing. Paradise means is when you do something good, you understand the goodness in the act in and of itself, and that's the appreciation. You understand the godliness of it. Any questions? Make sense? Okay. So now, here's where we get to. We're going to talk about more about what all of us down here. How do we contribute? Because the soul is not in a room, and the soul every time is getting a better understanding, is becoming more sensitive. So when the soul becomes more sensitive, it gets more elevated. So the soul is in a perpetual elevation. The soul is constantly going up, becoming more sensitive and getting a better appreciation. Oops, sorry, wrong way. The paradise is a progressive state based on the acts in which we do. The soul becomes much more appreciative of what we do, except for one day a year, the yard site. Because on the yard site, it's not based on what we do. On the yard site, the soul takes a quantum leap to a whole new level. So the entire year, the soul. That's why even if a person passed on many years before, the person comes and says Kaddish on the yard site, because on that day the soul makes a quantum leap, just like it did when it initially left the world. Right? When it left the world, we explained last week, there's a massive leap between this world and the next when it departs the body. Same thing as in the yard site, it makes a quantum leap in Gan Eden. And therefore, that's why on the yard site, we make sure to say Kaddish. So it's like this. The world to come is more pleasurable, but this world is more important, if you remember from the first class. Mm-hmm. So paradise for a soul is like autopilot. You pre-program the destination, and it's going. You can't do anything about it. It's going. It's constantly going, but the destination is pre-programmed. Does that make sense? It means it's not passive, but it's not active. The neshamos, their benefit is based on what they do, but they can't do anything else. That's why there's a custom that when we go to a Jewish to a cemetery, we tuck in our tzitzit. You heard that too? We tuck in our tzitzit. Why? As to not mock the dead, that they can't do a mitzvah. Why would they want to do a mitzvah? Because now that they appreciate what a mitzvah is, now they want to come back and do it. In fact, it says in Kabbalah that the souls would give everything away, give it all away, to come back just for a moment to say Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah, respond to Kaddish. That's how much they appreciate a mitzvah. So the souls up there can only go as far as what they did down here, commensurate to what they work over here. That's what they do over here. But we down here, we can help them. Look at text number 10. It means we can change. The Rashba says, Reb Shlomo ben Aderet, he says, if a person is the son of a righteous, and if you act in a righteous way, the way your parents molded you, then automatically you help the soul, because your child's good behavior, righteous behavior, is because you molded them. I often say this, but anyone who speaks to any of the old Yiddish old timers, when they would ask you, like when they ask a kid for their name, they wouldn't say, "What's your name?" "Was ist dein Name?" That's a new way of saying it. The old timers, they would say, "Wemens bist du?" Whose are you? Meaning, who are you a product of? Because depending on the way we act, we bring shame or joy or nachas to our parents, whether they're here or not. So if we act in a righteous way based on the teachings of our parents, then it causes them an elevation. For someone who's not related, if we do something, if we actually do something, dedicating charity, dedicating something, doing something on behalf of that soul, so that soul gets an elevation. So therefore, you have the auspicious times to do things, especially, is in the first 12 months, because that is when the soul is going through this trial, tribulation, transition period. That's why it's very important to do it in 12 months. And then also on the earth side, people dedicate things on the earth side. So, for example, some people will see here on, look at text 4.2, yeah, page 134, suggested mitzvot. All these have sources. So some people, you make sure to study the Torah or Mishnah. Mishnah has the same letters as the word neshama, which is soul. Some people dedicate a Torah scroll, dedicate books. Some people dedicate a kiddush, where everyone comes together, eating kosher food, saying a blessing. All that is done in the name of the person who has passed. Sponsor a Torah, a Torah class, especially by Yiskar. A Yiskar, people donate money because they want to do something positive in the name of the soul. They see the yahrzeit customs. You light a candle. You say Kaddish. All these things we do, we contribute to the soul having an elevation. And this leads us to the Kaddish. Everybody knows Kaddish. Everybody, even the Gentiles know Kaddish. Everybody knows Kaddish. It's the most important prayer that's around. Everybody knows it. But why? What is so great about Kaddish? Why, out of all the prayers that we choose to recite after a person was passed, do we choose Kaddish? So on text 11, you have the actual text of Kaddish. We start off saying, "Exalted and hallowed be His great name." If you find, by the way, in the text 11, there's no mention to anyone passing. It doesn't say anything about God passing, about a person passing. We mourn nothing. So Rabbi Steinsaltz, who is one of the foremost Jewish scholars of our times, he explains in text number 12 why Kaddish is so important. The reason why Kaddish is so important, he says, because every Jew, every person really, has a responsibility to glorify God's name. If you act the way you're supposed to, why? Because God commanded you to do so, so you are glorifying and sanctifying His name. When a person passes on, that person missing. That sanctification is missing. So what we're doing is we're saying we're filling in the void. You see in text number 12, where Shaindal says it. We're filling in the void, and we're allowing that sanctification to take place. So every Jew is responsible to establish God's sovereignty in this world. Saying Kaddish elevates the soul because God is being exalted in this world due to the deceased. And now you look at the story an appendix C, the story of Rabbi Akiva, which I can't say, we're very limited in time. Daniel, I'll tell you the story afterward. Okay, tell you the story of Rabbi Akiva and Kaddish. Rabbi Akiva made sure to have Kaddish being said. Which now leads us to the last section. We ran a little low. Reincarnation. So page number 139. How do you feel about reincarnation? You fascinated or pleased by the idea? Does it disturb you, or does it leave you indifferent? What do you think about reincarnation? Does it bother you? No. Some people like. Yeah, go ahead.
When I first heard it and about Jewish, I said that's ridiculous. But then I started seeing, and then I'm going through. Well, I'm carrying other people's stuff. I got enough problems.
Right.
I got to carry their stuff too.
Okay, very good. So some people say it's very good. They like the concept of reincarnation because at least I know I'm not just a random passing shadow in the history of the world. I'm part of a long link, and I'm important. Some people don't like it. Like Doug said, I have my own problems. What are you telling me? You know,
That's
you're
sort of joking.
right. You know, no, but seriously, what do you mean? I have no identity. I'm just some recycled. You know, on my soul, you see on the bottom over here, there's a triangle. Number 3. You know what that means, right? I mean, how many times the bottle was recycled? That's what it means. When the numbers, that's what I am. I'm just recycled goods. So what is it? What I do doesn't make a difference. It doesn't. Some people don't like it. So to understand it like this, we have to understand also the timeline. When a person passes on, when does he go to Gehenna or Canaan? And when does the Hebrew word for reincarnation is Gilgul? Gilgul, which means to roll. Gilgul. So when does that take place? Right away. So how does that work? Are you just another person's soul? Are you, or are you someone else? Or whose are you? Right? Exactly. So look at text number 13. We have to get. No, I want to just say text number 13 and 14. It's a very, very complex Kabbalistic matter, which even the author who wrote this, Rabbi Chaim Vital, the student of the Arizal, right? He wrote it, and afterwards he said, "But I couldn't quite define it and explain it well." You're talking something that's very, very, very complex and very spiritual. But please read text number 13 and 14. He says it all began with one soul. Adam possessed the core soul. Now, by the way, just want to use men, but men and women are two halves of one soul. So there is all. Every soul has a female and male counterpart. Every soul is complete. Okay. In fact, when Adam was created man and woman together. If you want more, see me after class. Okay. Anyway, so first it was the soul of Adam. I know because Sabrina gave me looks. And so first it was the soul of Adam, and Adam had all 70 souls, all future souls. Subsequently, that general soul was passed on to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What about everyone else? Everybody else that wasn't part of the general soul. They were supporting cast, important but not founding. After the 3 forefathers passed on to the 12 tribes. After the 12 tribes, it was passed down to the 70 descendants who came down to Egypt. And then these root souls were passed on to the 600,000 subdivided founding fathers. We have how many founding fathers in the United States? Judaism, we have 600,000 founding fathers who stood around Mount Sinai. And all the souls are subdivided from there. So now, look at text number 14, because I think it's going to answer the question which someone said before. Are you just another person's soul? What are you doing? There are 613 mitzvot in the Torah. Everyone familiar with that number? 613, right? Each one of us have to complete all 613. That means each soul, 600,000, is subdivided into 613 parts. So a soul comes down. So now, if that soul perfected its mitzvah, then come back. Then fine, you're good to go. But if the soul didn't, then it has to come back and do its job. Right? Yes.
So if on that theory or possibility, if Adam or Abraham, they completed all 613, no one living has their soul of them because they completed it. Like you get a diploma.
So yeah, it's a very good. But they lived before the giving of the Torah. So Kabbalah talks about the first 2,000 years was years of chaos, were just setting the stage. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob laid the foundation for the 600,000 Jews who stood around Mount Sinai. The 600,000 Jews stood around Mount Sinai was a byproduct of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and because we are their children, so just like genetically we have DNA of our parents, so too we all have the DNA of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's why we are natural believers. We're called Aminim B'nim Aminim.
Question I wanted to ask is the soul of DNA.
The soul, what do you mean? Does the soul have DNA? What do you mean by that?
That's exactly what I asked.
No.
Does the soul have any DNA? Is there anything of the soul that exists in the physical universe?
No.
Energy.
No. the soul doesn't have.
She said something.
But she said it's a spirit. It's not a.
Well, why don't she says something?
I think. Oh, battery was running low. I guess it means it's time for me to be quiet. So okay. So it said. So you see in text number 15. We're getting late, so let's try to finish up. The 600,000 founding souls were root souls. Each of the offshoots has an ability to regenerate. Meaning, we all have this responsibility to do the whole time. So if we do what we're supposed to do, fine. If we don't, then we have to come back and do that job. Now, by the way, not doing what we were supposed to is subdivided into two groups. There's doing negative and not doing positive. And sometimes the soul can come in for a very short time. The story is like that. So we all have a job to do. There's a general job that has to get done, and our job is to do that job. So if we finish the job, good. If not, then we have to come back. It's not a punishment.
And by job, you mean reach 613.
Right. So you can have a person who every soul has to do all 613. Not every person is. Not all mitzvot are applicable to every person. Their mitzvot only applicable to a king. So that element of that soul will go to the king. And some people reincarnate as a Kohen. It's not a punishment. It's a job that has to get done. Sometimes it's not so much a punishment, but because a person didn't do his job, well, God says the job has to get done somehow. So sometimes the soul will reincarnate as a positive, and sometimes it has a negative.
But we reincarnate in a human being, not an animal.
Okay.
nothing like
That